Welcome to the Guilbault Girls Show, where you will have the opportunity to hear from mothers, fathers, siblings, and individuals themselves about their journey of living with a disability. I know, it's called Guilbault Girls, but we have a bonus for you as we get the Guilbault boys to interview some of the dads and siblings to get their perspectives too. We'll also have special guests from time to time to share the many resources that are available to those living with a disability and their families. So get ready to laugh, smile, cry, maybe even get a little angry when you hear some of those stories of their day-to-day struggles. But let's not forget their many triumphs. As they say, it takes a village, and if it weren't for our village, we wouldn't be where we are today. So join us. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Guilbault Girls Show. I'm your host, Karen Guilbault, and today's guest is Jawanda Mast. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So Jawanda is the National Down Syndrome Congress, NDSC, Grassroots Advocacy Manager. She has been involved in disability policy advocacy since her daughter Rachel was born with Down syndrome over 24 years ago. Jawanda has graduate and undergraduate degrees from the University of Arkansas and was honored with the 2017 Alumni Community Service Award for her body of advocacy work. She spent 8 years advocating for the passage of the Federal ABLE Act. She has provided written and oral testimony on a variety of federal and state policy issues and has served on many state-appointed committees. Jawanda believes we all have a story, and we can use those stories to impact change at all levels. She is passionate about the meaningful inclusion of individuals with Down syndrome and other intellectual disabilities in all aspects of the community and has presented at many different conferences. Jawanda says her work is a hashtag labor of love and conviction. Amen to that. I love that. So first of all, thank you so much. Welcome. I'm glad that you agreed to hop on for this. So I'm excited to have you. So
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So let's dive in. Let's start from the beginning. How was your pregnancy? Did you have any complications? Was she preterm? And at what stage did you find out about her diagnosis with Down syndrome?
Well, I did not have any problems with my pregnancy, and I was never sick a day, and I felt great. Okay. The only thing, I was really tired that first trimester. But I was like model pregnant person. But I was going to be 38 or close to 30. Well, I was 38 when Rachel would be born. I didn't know she was Rachel then. And I wanted to have an amnio by choice. And people ask me, do I think everybody should have had an amnio? And no, I think it's a very personal thing. And you have to decide what is best for your family. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give a little aside here. I also don't really love it when people say to me, well, I didn't have an amnio because it wouldn't have made a difference, because that implies that to me, it implies the only reason you do it is so you could choose not to have your baby. And that's not why we did it. We did it because I'm a control freak and I wanted to be prepared. Mm-hmm. And, my doctor and I talked about it, and we chose to have the amnio. What I didn't plan for was my husband, who was 34. He's a few years younger than I am. Picture of health and no history of cancer in his family, to be diagnosed with colorectal cancer in January of the year Rachel was born. So my husband had his colorectal tumor removed on a Monday. On a Thursday, and I brought him home Friday morning, and that night my OBGYN called me at home to tell me that our unborn daughter had Down syndrome. And I'm not gonna lie, it was really, really, really hard. Hard for my husband, hard for me, hard for different perspectives. I don't know what it's like to have cancer, and I sure don't know what it's like to have cancer and find out your child has Down syndrome.
Right.
But I'm a person of faith, and God walked with us through all of this. And I am happy to report that my husband is 24 years cancer free, and we are very blessed. So.
Wow. Absolutely. Oh, I'm tearing up. That is so awesome. So I know you said how it was tough. I can't even imagine, just having the weight on your shoulders of your husband going through this and now finding this out. So how did you process it all?
It was a lot. It really was. But like I said, people are gonna think this is kind of crazy when I tell this, but the weekend I was working for a local nonprofit in Memphis. We lived in Memphis at the time.
Okay.
And we had our biggest fundraiser of the year that Sunday, and I managed the volunteers. And I called my boss and said that I would not be there, told him what was going on because I needed a minute, needless to say. And my immediate supervisor called me like that Sunday to check on me, and she didn't know. And I told her, and she said, "Congratulations." Because you know what? She had always wanted a baby and she'd struggled with becoming pregnant. And I tell people that's the most important thing you can say to someone. But that Sunday, it was unseasonably warm in Memphis, and it was a hard couple of days. And my sister came over to be with me, and she said all just the perfect things. But as I said, I'm a person of faith, and all that weekend I struggled with, God, are you still the God that, because I didn't know anything about Down syndrome. I mean, right. I knew what little bit I'd learned in high school. IDEA wasn't passed when I was in school. Right. So I'd never really been around anybody with Down syndrome. And what I knew was not good. Now I look back and realize I don't apologize for that because I didn't know. Okay.
Right. You
don't know. It was it was a hard time, but that Sunday morning, this is my favorite Bible verse is Jeremiah 29:11. It says, I love it from the NIV. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. They are plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. And I wrestled with God about that weekend. And I'm going to tell you that Sunday morning, I was sitting out on our patio, unseasonably warm. And it was like, I know God did not really speak to me, okay? But I felt like I could just hear God saying, Jawanda, I know you are angry with me, and I know you don't understand, but I really am the God who has the best plans for you, and trust me, and it'll be okay. And I have so many stories throughout life where that came back to me, and I was watching Rachel do something, and I could hear the Lord saying, I told you I've got this. I promised you I've got this. So yeah, it was a hard time. So
yeah. And that brings it to, to the next thing about support, about, how much support did you have along the way? And do you have any words of wisdom for those that might be walking this walk right now and just entering this journey? Because we know how key it is to have support, guidance, and understanding on all levels.
I do.
I love your accent, by the way. Sorry. I just absolutely love your accent. I just want to bottle it up.
Yeah, everybody loves my accent. They're like, could you go with us to ask for something? It's funny. I'm the sassy Southern girl, we have been very fortunate to have a really great friends network. And we are also very fortunate because there are other people that did not have the same thing happen to them. Our friends all just joined our journey. So many of them, for years, I wrote a letter. That date was February 5th, 1999. And for years, I sent an email to the people that had been with us through that. Friends we've had since high school, a lot from college, a lot along the way, and said, this day was a defining moment in my life. Yeah. And we have just been so fortunate because those friends came along with us. We had a wonderfully supportive church that wanted to help us, support us, didn't know what we needed, but were willing to do whatever we needed. So many people reached out and loved us, and I am just beyond grateful for that. And, knowing ahead of time did give me the opportunity to go and learn so that I was ready. Yeah. To get Rachel going in early intervention. It was a learning curve too. I didn't have any children. She's an only child. So, and I've worked with kids for a long time through 4-H and different things. So I've seen a lot of examples of good, not so good parenting, worked with kids at church and stuff. So, I had all that, but I'd never had a child. So you've got that. But early intervention is mandated by the federal government for baby or newborn to 3 with disabilities. So we were able to benefit from that. So we had already visited places and lined up what we wanted to do for our early intervention. And the first time we went, Rachel was a week old, and there was a lady there with her little boy. We ended up being in a group together. His name is Ben, and we ended up being in a group together because we were grouped together by age. And it just so happened the group we were in, there were 4 people with Down syndrome. Our group was called Ben's Angels. But when I had prayed that God would send me a friend that had a child with a disability, because I didn't really have friends that had children with disabilities. And then, oh, by the way, God, if it could be somebody that has a child with Down syndrome, that would be even better. And not being picky here, I go home, called the director, the person overseeing the program, and said, I don't know if you can do this, but could you give me this person's phone number? Because I thought maybe we could be friends. And she said, I was getting ready to call you because she's already called. We live less than 10 minutes from each other, and we've been dear friends. Even though we don't live there anymore, we've been dear friends and still support each other.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that a great story? But I got a lot of support. I felt like our early intervention program was amazing, and we're very, very fortunate. And then, so that's where a lot of, my support came from. For me, I am a doer. The other thing I forgot to say that I was going to say is that Monday morning after I had the diagnosis, we went to see our doctor. I had not been home very long, and I went and looked in the mirror and said, Jawanda, it is time for you to quit feeling sorry for yourself. I honestly said this out loud. It is time for you to quit feeling sorry for yourself. You learned that this baby has Down syndrome for a reason, and she's going to be dependent on you, and you need to go figure out what you're supposed to do. So get to it. Now, I still had a few more pity parties, but
as we all do.
Yes. So, and you know what? I wrote a blog about that. And that's one of the things I say in the blog. What would I say all these years later? It's okay to have a pity party every now and then. Just don't stay stuck. If you stay stuck, you need to go look for help. Yep. I also tell people to try to have friends, not just on social media. We didn't have social media back then. We didn't have social media till we moved here to Kansas 15 years ago. And not because of where we lived. It's that new. Yeah. I don't think younger families can really understand that. You need real live people in your community if you live somewhere where you can have that. I understand some people don't, but it makes a difference. And they're the people that are going to help you know which doctors to go to and about the program nobody told you about. Exactly. I think laughing at yourself is really important. And we laugh at ourselves a lot. I have some great stories about that. Another thing, the last thing I'll say on that and what I would say to people is I tell people you need to be educated and educate. Usually people say educate and be educated, but no, you have to educate yourself before you can educate other people. And if you don't search out information through conventions, through reputable websites, through organizations, you can't know what's going to work best. Yep. You may know kind of what you think works best with your child, but you may not have even known that you should be trying something with your child. Yeah. So I'm a real pro education person.
Yep. Have to be. Did your marriage change any after you had Rachel, being that she had Down syndrome? Because you always see the statistics on marriages kind of falling apart. And like with us, it actually pushed my husband and I together closer. But you read all those statistics about how marriages fall apart when they have a child with a disability. Did your marriage change in any way?
Not like that, but I will tell you this, it's very interesting, and I couldn't find the research right now if I had to. Do you know, you're right, marriages, there's a significant increase in marriages splitting up, except in the Down syndrome population. In the Down syndrome population, they do not see that same statistic if it's separated out. And again, I couldn't find the research now if I had to tell you. I think we had a unique situation too because of the cancer, that my husband had. And we were fortunate because Rachel's healthy. She had Down syndrome, but a lot of babies with Down syndrome have many, many health issues.
That was my next question. Yeah.
Yeah. Rachel has been very healthy overall. She had, I have allergies and have had nose surgeries and stuff. So if she didn't have Down syndrome, she might have that. But children with Down syndrome do tend to have more issues, respiratory, hearing loss, ear infections, those different kind of things. And Rachel definitely was like that. She didn't have an ear infection all the time, but she definitely had her share. She's had to have some ear surgeries as a middle schooler, high schooler, because she had some strange thing when she had a hole in her eardrum. And she has something that I can't pronounce, that skin growing on the back of your eardrum that can cause all kinds of problems. And so she had to have 4 different ear surgeries, but she has minor hearing loss because from that in one ear, because they were able to do what they did. But she's really been overall very healthy. So we've been very, very, very fortunate
for that. Yeah. Yeah. Can you share with us what your typical day looked like back then, or week was like, between juggling work and therapies and specialist appointments and all of that good stuff?
Well, I was pretty fortunate because that is something that did change. I had never been somebody that had intended to stay home with children. But even before we knew how she had Down syndrome, we had made the decision that that's what we would do. And we were older, so that I don't know if that plays into it, but anyhow, so I just did some little part-time things here and there, but I also was able to invest myself in volunteer work. And I have a background in volunteer management, so I truly know the value of and love volunteers. And so because of that, I kind of invested myself that way. And because that's the way I'm made, it really energizes me and it's my catharsis to get involved in things. So that's what I did. But we did not have a lot of specialist appointments because she was so healthy. And our early intervention provider was a center-based program. That's what we chose. And we went 1 day a week, every Monday for 3 years. And Rachel rotated through different things. We had time together with the other families. They taught them sign language. That was part of our speech therapy. And one of the best things they did in that program was they had a component on teaching parents. It was a parent support component. I didn't always like that, but the part I loved was they taught us the law, special education law, to help us transition out of early intervention into the public school system when she turned 3. But regular people don't have therapists coming to their houses, but we had a few therapists that came to our houses. But you know what? This is the other thing I say in that blog about what I'd say all these years later. You know what? You need to have your life as normal as possible, whatever that is for you. And we made a decision pretty early that, you know what, if it's the holidays but we did not have health issues. And I want to be clear about that, because you have medically fragile children. That's a whole different thing. So we did not have that. But, during the holidays, we just say, we're not going to do these therapies. We'll do this stuff at home ourselves, but we're going to go do fun things. We're going to go to the zoo today. I didn't cancel something a day ahead. I mean, I planned ahead. But we really did try to do very typical things. And one of the things I did is there was something there where we live in our community called Mom's Day Out at local churches. And we signed Rachel up to go to that 2 days a week when she was old enough to do that, because I wanted her to be around other children. And she didn't go to daycare. She did interact with other children through our early intervention provider, but I felt like she needed more than just the church time or the little play dates you could do. And we don't have other children. So we started in the typical Mom's Day Out. The other reason we did it is I started learning about inclusion pretty early and how you're going to have to fight for it. And I started planning then and laying the groundwork. She's always been with typical kids. She's going to be with typical kids in the classroom. So it started way back then.
Yeah. What about on those days and in those moments when you felt overwhelmed? What are some of the things that you do or have done in the past to help you cope, or is there an outlet that you went to?
Well, I write. I love to write. And so I frequently pick up a journal and just write. I write and throw things away. I write a bunch of emails that I never send to make me feel better that it's probably good they weren't sent. And friends. I'm just blessed with good friends. And, the blessing of the friend with the child with Down syndrome and I've met so many other people through the years with children with disabilities and Down syndrome. We really did get to be friends with the people we did the early intervention program with. And you know, Becky and I could say things to each other that you can't say to somebody that doesn't have a child with Down syndrome, and you might even be offended if somebody said. But another blessing, we had several people that we were good friends with, but became even better friends with. One, her name is Holly. And Holly actually was a little bit younger, quite a bit younger than me, but they were in our group at church. And she loved children, and she was an early child preschool teacher for children with disabilities. And Holly loved on Rachel so much and loved on us. In fact, when we left and moved here, Holly scheduled a time just to do something with Rachel. She had a little girl by then, and I thought they were all going to do something. And when she brought her home, I'll start crying telling this. When she brought her home, she said, I left my little girl with her daddy because we had Rachel before she had her daughter for several years, and she was kind of like an aunt. My sister didn't live there, and she was kind of like her, more than an aunt. They were friends. Yeah. And she said, I left my little girl with her husband because I needed my time with Rachel. And anyhow, we've stayed in touch with them though. But people like that God blessed us with, you know, so that we likely would not have been as close to if it had not been for Rachel.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so then it brings me to the next question, which you obviously didn't because you have had a lot of support, but you know, have you ever felt socially isolated? Or did you ever feel lonely, like you're around people, but they're not with you? But you found those people during early intervention that were your true people, but
I think that struggle becomes more prevalent for us, not everybody, because I know I've just heard some horrible stories about families not accepting it, friends feeling like all your friends had left you, not wanting to be around your friends because you felt like they didn't understand, or their kids are reaching typical milestones when your child isn't, all that.
Yeah.
But you know, I think I have felt that more as Rachel has been in middle school, high school, and as an adult. Not necessarily socially isolated, but often thinking you really don't get it. You don't understand. You do not understand. You do not understand that my child, who is 24 years old, cannot get herself anywhere. We have to help her, and we have terrible disability transportation where we live. And yeah, you can use Uber, but you got to be sure that's safe. There's so many things you've got to figure out with any kind of ride share. And then there's the expense of it. It's really expensive, especially now. So, and I am probably unrealistic sometimes. I'll get irritated and think, you have been around Rachel all these years and you didn't think to ask if we needed help with that. But the flip side of that is I have people all the time tell me, I'm so glad that you're in this group because we would know all of this about people with disabilities if we didn't know you. You know, a lot of times I don't think it's that it's not intentional. People just don't know. Now, sometimes there's a few intentional people, but you know what I mean? But I do think for me, it's probably been a little, I have great friends here and we have wonderful support, but it has been a little more that you really just don't get it.
Yeah. I had a hard time because even when we moved over to a different county, I started struggling as again, middle school, high school, and we moved to new county. So it was hard meeting people here. And we have found our people that we love here finally. But still, there's not, with faith with cerebral palsy, it's like everybody with cerebral palsy is so different. Like there's so different, you know, levels on how they affect them, where they affect them, like everything. So there's been very few people that we've met that really faith can relate to. We're grateful for the ones that we have. But so sometimes you know, we still get it, but still sometimes it's hard because, you know, you're kind of dealing with a little bit of different things than what the others are. But yeah, and as you get older, I feel it gets harder. It definitely gets harder. And I am
different challenges. Yeah, different.
Sure. Exactly. And we just ended up joining a church. We started going last February, and we switched churches because the one that we were going to, the everybody's off to college now. The youth group isn't, you know what I mean? Or they're on the worship team, and I really needed faith to, like, so we ended up going to a church right down the road, which I've been involved with on and off for different things, but they're one of like the top 25 churches in the country that has the biggest special needs ministry. So there, I've met a lot of folks there, like parents and stuff that we can relate to and everything. And granted, a lot of them are older than her, but they actually did get a grant for the younger ones too. But they will pack that room with like 800 to 900 individuals between the people with the disabilities and then their personal supports or respite or whatever. And they meet Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then they do Pizza with Jesus every third Thursday or something
like that. That's cute.
Yeah, and then they have a service on Sunday mornings at 11 for them, and then we've been going to the 6 o'clock one too because Faith was going in with the typical kids because she goes to the Maryland School for the Blind, so she is with people with disabilities all day long, so she needs to get that socialization too. But yeah, so it plays a big part. What about go ahead.
I want to say this one thing about church.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
We have overall had good experiences. I've had a few stories I could share, but I do a lot of speaking around the country, and I don't evangelize or proselytize, but people know I'm a person of faith. And almost every time I speak, someone comes up afterwards and tells me their horror story about church. I've heard so many. Yeah. And I do think the church, and when I said the church, I mean the church, not my church or your church.
Right.
I really do think that is a place we must do better.
Absolutely.
There are too many people with kids with disabilities that their children aren't being served and their needs aren't being met. And that's a podcast for another day. So.
Yeah. And now I have to share just two things about our church. So which touched me. So one, there's a boy who has Down syndrome, and he goes up there and he plays guitar. We'll go up there with worship team, and he'll play the guitar, and he has, what's the thing that goes around your neck, and he plays like the harmonica or whatever. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then when pastor and his wife were up at the altar praying, there was this one gentleman, James, I love him. He would go right up to him, and he would kneel down and put his hand on him, and he'd start praying. Pastor's like, I don't know, it was hard. It's hard to understand when he talks, and he's like, but that's all God. He's just like, it was just such a beautiful picture, just seeing him go up there to kneel. It's like, oh my gosh. But we just have so many families, and it's very rare for a lot of, it's a rarity to have churches out there that really tailor to the special needs family.
Well, or no, and the flip side of that for us is it's hard, or for whoever, is it's sometimes hard to find a church that's inclusive.
Yeah.
That they want to put, and if that's what you want, that's fine, but that's not what we wanted. We want Rachel with everybody else. And that's a different challenge. Like I said, we're going to have that podcast another day.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. No, yes. And their regular youth group, they all intertwine and come in and group with them, kind of like the best buddies thing and stuff.
Yeah.
So, which is great. Okay. So next up, so how was your experience back then with her going to school, navigating the whole school system and the IEP process, and what advice?
Well, that could take,
that's a whole other one in itself too.
Yeah, that could take days and days and days. I will say just a little bit about that. When Rachel was 2, I was already on the inclusion bandwagon. But when Rachel was 2, I went to a Down syndrome conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and I heard 3 speakers who changed my life, and I hope have changed a lot of other people's lives through me. One was Mike Remus, who was the special education director. One was Karen Gaffney, who's a young woman with Down syndrome, who was the first person with Down syndrome to swim the English Channel. She's got a foundation. Another one's name was Fiona Hawks, who was a local person with Down syndrome who drove, and this was 22 years ago, and worked at, I believe, a utility company. But I heard the 3 of them made a beeline to all three of them, the two young women and their families. As soon as they were finished speaking, you'd be a great role model for my daughter. My daughter's 2. What did you do? Inclusion, inclusion, inclusion. That's what they told me. Their parents said, do not let them separate your daughter, blah, 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 blah. And then Michael Remus, who's well known around the country, he's really a mover and shaker in the inclusion movement for people with disabilities. He put it all in perspective for me in the nuts and bolts of it. And I actually, things come full circle. Rachel and I actually got to be on he spoke at a conference we spoke at a few years ago, and I thought I had arrived because he truly changed my life. But that caused me to do the research and do the education and find out what is best practices, what works, and learn the law. And so we wanted Rachel included. We did not want her visiting the general education classroom. We didn't want her separated, and the research all supports that. I would not know any of that had I not educated myself, gone to conferences, blah, 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 blah. It was very hard. It was hard where we lived. Not as hard where we moved to, but I still, Rachel's case manager, her senior year, looked at me and said, you know, Jawanda, I was thinking about this the other day. She said, it's like you've gone to school twice, because I was that involved, but I could be that involved, and a lot of people can't. But that was our value, that we wanted Rachel included, but it's also what the research says works.
Right.
But you can't make people do inclusion right. You can make them do it, but we didn't want Rachel to be stuck in a classroom. We wanted her to be meaningfully included.
Yeah.
And I wrote a couple of things down because I knew you're going to ask me this question, because I will really get us off topic if I don't. And this is what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Throughout life, but especially for school, have high expectations. And I think the people who have worked with us will tell you that our high expectations help them, high but reasonable. Our high expectations help them to have high expectations. I wanted meaningful inclusion. I don't want Rachel stuck in a classroom. I want her meaningfully included, and that's going to look a little bit different for everybody. I treated IEP meetings more like a business meeting. Now, I did take food because I am a really good cook, and it didn't hurt. And a lot of people don't like that, but it is what it is. But I did treat them very much like a business meeting. We took our own agenda, which surprisingly, I sometimes took over the meeting, and we followed my agenda. I think one of the most important things you can do when your children with disabilities are little is share your vision statement for your child. And you should be doing that at the beginning of IEP meetings anyhow.
And have a picture of them. We did the same thing when we did all of our parent advocacy classes, help them make binders, have their vision statement, the pictures. Yes. And lay it right there in the middle of the table.
Yes. And Rachel went to most of her meetings. She did not stay, but she went, and she would introduce herself or whatever. But what we do when our kids are 3, 5, 7 impacts where they're going to be when they're 16, 18, 25. That may be true for everyone, but it's really more true for us. And you know what? I am the one that's going to be held accountable for Rachel. And if somebody's going to be wrong about something, I darn sure want it to be me, because you may love my child and she has so many people that love her, but I'm the one responsible. But I would say learn the law. You know, everybody tells you to go hire an attorney, and sometimes you need to do that. I believe in learning the law and using the law to advocate. It does not make you adversarial. It makes you educated and able to say, I don't think that's right. You know, be educated and educate. Be as involved as you can be. I am fortunate. I was able to be the room mom. I was able to be the volunteer. I could see what was going on. But that also helped me to have eyes for other kids too. One of my favorite lines for an IEP meeting when you're told something is, I'd like to see that policy in writing, please. When someone tells you something that sounds even the least bit off, then just ask them to see the policy in writing. And a lot of times they don't have the policy in writing. Sometimes it's because they just don't know. It's just how they've always done it, and they think that what they're telling you is correct. We have that happen numerous times. I'm not saying they're out to get anybody, but that is a great statement. guide your IEP with your vision statement, and just think about where you want your child to be, because the choices that you're going to make, Mom's Day Out, I knew I wanted Rachel to be included in society, and I knew I had to start early. And you know what? On the inclusion thing, I knew if we started out, I'd read enough and seen enough that I knew if we started out being in a segregated setting, that we would never get back in a gen ed setting. So we're going to start. The law does not say you have to earn your way into the general education classroom. That's where you start. And then we add the supports. And that's kind of what guided us. And it was hard. It was really hard, but I will do it all again because I believe Rachel is who she is because of that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Can you share with us how you got involved in disability policy advocacy and tell us more about that journey and how it's been over the years? Because you've done quite a bit.
Well, I learned, when she was young about inclusion and the law. And I've always kind of liked policy and politics and stuff like that. And I learned some of the first things people told us before when we found out she had Down syndrome was you can't save money for your child with disabilities. And I thought, well, that's crazy. Why would they not want you to save money? Well, sure enough, there's a law that says you can only have $2,000 in assets, not money, assets, and still get your government means tested benefits. A little more complicated than that, but so I was kind of already interested in that stuff and wanted to learn about policy and good policy, and learned about it at national meetings. I would go to things and hear these experts, and I really enjoy hearing it. And so I learned about it and learned that that's something that we as parents and as people with disabilities have to advocate for, that it's not just going to be given to us. And we want to advocate for good laws and good public policies. So that's kind of how I got started. And I started going with other people from our community, and then helping get people from our community to go to disability days at our Capitol. And Rachel, I think, was 3 the first time I took her, and she got tired. Her dad was with us, and she was so cute. She had on this cute little outfit and this big bow in her hair, and she was kind of tired. She's a good little trooper, but Rachel loves an audience, okay? And we had a couple more visits, the group I was with. And so I said, Jonathan, why don't y'all stay here and I'll finish that up, because she was tired. Right. Well, we come back maybe 30 minutes later, and there's this huge crowd of people around where they were. Well, she was just entertaining everybody, and several legislators stopped and talked to her. So that's not how she got started. Actually, I lied. She got started because I took her to a congressman's town hall meeting, because I wanted to ask him a question. And I thought if I took my 2-year-old, they'd call on me because they'd think that she might get loud or cry or something. And Rachel was really well behaved, but I was right. They called on me first, and we went on to have a good relationship. So that's kind of how I got started, and I like it. And there's so much people do not realize, the people that fought for us to be able to have our children have the right to a free and appropriate public education. Many of them, their children never had that right.
Right. Yeah.
And 1975, the it wasn't called this then, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was passed. And a lot of moms who advocated for that did that for my child. And I feel like I should pay that forward.
Yep.
So that's kind of how I got involved in that. And then it's kind of become my bread and butter.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Because there's so many different little nuances and things that we both like, because I did the same thing. And if I hadn't gotten involved in the ARC and help facilitate the parent advocacy classes, and then I had a seat on the special education citizens advisory committee. So I got to know the special ed director and a lot of them. And there was times where I actually had the special ed director come and sit at the meetings with me, not adversarially again, but to put our brains together. Like half the stuff, if I didn't know half the stuff that I knew, and I worked for the school too, I wouldn't have gotten half of this stuff. And same thing. And then when she was diagnosed with seizure disorder, I actually left my job for 2 years. But then I'm one where I can't sit still. And then I got involved even more. And then that's when I ended up going and I sat on the Developmental Disability Council here in Maryland. And I finished out someone's 2-year term, but then I couldn't commit to another 5 because I had to go back to work. And again, I met so many people through, because we would go with the ARC every year to legislative for Developmental Disability Day. We would bring Faith and we would bring my son. And so yeah. And again, it's learning and educating, and then being there to pass on and give that knowledge to the ones coming up behind you. Absolutely. 110%.
And being involved in those things open doors, serving, like you'll be invited to be on a site council and get to know the people of the district office. And then it's the same thing as meeting with elected officials. You're building a relationship. And you see each other as human, and you learn to agree and disagree, but you can go to those people and work together. For the common good. So
yeah. How were you? And I know Rachel spoke too and testified. How were you guys, like your first time? Were you guys like really nervous, or were you just?
Neither of us really. This is funny. I did partners in policy making. Did you do the partners in policy making in Maryland?
I don't remember. It was so long ago.
It's a wonderful training thing across the country called Partners in Policy Making. And I highly recommend it. I personally think it's the best thing. Not every state has it, but a lot of states do. And it's a big commitment. But one of the things we had to do in this Partners in Policy Making thing was we were supposed to do our elevator speech. And so the weekend that we did that, because it was all on a weekend, Friday and Saturday, I was the one to go first, and I did mine. And the director of the program looked at me and said, "This isn't your first rodeo." I said, "No, I've done a lot of public speaking." So my nervousness is wanting to make sure I say what is the most meaningful.
Right.
And the time you have, it's really hard for me to speak in the time you have, because you usually have such a short time. I will tell you what I've learned, though. They usually won't cut off a self-advocate. They'll cut off a parent, but not a self-advocate. But where we really, where I kind of became most engaged and also became kind of known around the country was for the ABLE Act, Achieving a Better Life Experience Act.
Yes. And I actually had the lady who runs the Maryland ABLE on my podcast too. And I always send that to people. I'm like, yep. And then we did one. I had another one for special needs trusts and trustees. So I'm always like trying to get those resources on the podcast as well. So
people need to know about the resources, and they just don't know. But we were fortunate. We advocated for that for 8 years. Moved here in the middle of that. And I think I told you this when we talked before. I have had no political connections. My family doesn't have money. Didn't know any of these people. But you know what? I know how to tell a story, and I am persistent. And we just started going to visit our legislators, became friends with some of them, developed relationships with all of them. Of course, they all loved Rachel. Take those people with disabilities with you to see these people and let them use their voice. That doesn't mean they have to use their physical voice. Maybe they use an augmentative communication device. Maybe they type something up. Maybe you work out what they want to say or do pictures, whatever. You can figure out a way to help your child or that person with a disability use their voice. And Rachel is a much more effective advocate than I am. That's my daughter. We've already said that, but she is very good. She has learned by osmosis, and she's learned by going to those visits what's important, and that your story is important, and it's important to ask them to do something and follow up. Wow. So I love doing advocacy. Would love to come back and talk more about that sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us more about what the National Down Syndrome Congress is, what its mission and vision is, and what is your role as the Grassroots Advocacy Manager?
The National Down Syndrome Congress is the oldest national Down syndrome organization in the United States. I'm not exactly sure how old we are, but next year we will have our 52nd annual convention. We're kind of known for that. It's called the largest family reunion. It's likely the largest gathering of people with Down syndrome in the country, and it's a family convention, and we have all kinds of things with it. NDSC, we have an official mission statement, but we educate, advocate, empower, and inspire. And our convention is one way we do that. We have resources for families across the lifespan. We do webinars for families, educational across the lifespan. Our convention is a wonderful resource because we have all of the best national speakers in advocacy, education, co-occurring Down syndrome and autism, behavior. There's a youth and adult track for people with Down syndrome. There's a siblings track for siblings, very popular. I run the advocacy training boot camp because our policy area has a strong presence at that. Our policy team is the most experienced policy team in the Down syndrome community. We have someone who's the former director of OSEP, Stephanie Smith-Lee, who she's our interim director right now. She also helped to start the first inclusive college program at George Mason University. Ricky Sabia, who is our senior education advisor, who has been around for a long time and represents people with Down syndrome's interest on many task force and national initiatives to make sure our voices of people with Down syndrome are represented in the education arena. We have a policy associate, Chapman, who does a lot of work on the Hill. Then I do the grassroots advocacy. And I tell people what I get to do. I do truly believe everyone has a story. And, you know, everyone's not me. Everyone wasn't born to talk, and praise the Lord, and tell stories. But I have seen people that aren't outgoing like I am, that are shy, that struggle to speak in front of people, learn to use their voice because of that child they have with Down syndrome or another disability. Yeah. And legislators and policymakers and decision makers will tell you over and over again that the thing that impacts them is your personal stories. Our life and our journey is an example of that. We went and found our legislators, told them our story, and Rachel told them her story, and we were able to pass good legislation. We've also worked on a number of other things besides ABLE. Sometimes it doesn't go well, sometimes it does. But you just have to keep on doing that. So I work with a network of volunteer advocates across the country. We have advocates in it's called NDAC, National Down Syndrome Advocacy Coalition. We have advocates in all 50 states. With Down syndrome and family members and people that love them, friends, professionals, whatever. We do some education. We utilize them to help us expand our outreach. For example, if we have someone that contacts us and says, a Senate office, we need help getting legislators to vote in this committee for this to pass out of committee so we can move it forward. Can you reach out to your advocates? I can quickly and easily figure out who do I have in Texas and those districts and we reach out to them and they call, and we have gotten feedback from many offices that it's made a difference. So I love what I do, and I love working with people. So
it shows. I love it. So let's talk about the Sassy Southern Girl blog. When did you start blogging? I know that you said you always like to write and stuff. So what inspired you to actually start the blog and share it with people? And then what kind of feedback have you gotten over, the years? Because I know your story has touched many.
It's a very neglected blog these days, but it's funny. I've always loved to write, and people used to say to me all the time when blogs first started, they would say, you are such a great storyteller. You have the best stories. You should write a blog. And my husband's saying you should write a blog so you can make some money, which I hadn't figured out how you do that yet. But anyhow, and I was like, who has time to read blogs? I don't have time to read blogs. But one day, I don't know what I saw, but the name, the Sassy, somebody said it to me. You're the Sassy Southern Gal. And I thought, that would be a great blog. And we do have all these experiences we've had. And I thought, you know what, that would be a great way for me to share. So it is more about Rachel and disability than anything else, but I do talk about a few other things in it. But I really started it just trying to share some of the things that have worked for us. And you know what works for me may not work for you, but you can also learn. She tried this and it didn't work. Maybe this is why it didn't work. So maybe we could try it and it would be different. I tell people, don't make my fight your fight, but do pay attention, and it may help you to navigate something. An example is we had a friend that struggled with a particular speech therapist in the school system. And, she said, you need to avoid her. But we had a great experience with her. But you know what? I also heard what that mom said and thought about that. There's so many examples of that. But so I just started sharing stories about things we did. And I tell people, I'm not telling you this is the way you need to do it. I'm just telling you that this is what worked for us. And maybe these are some things to think about. Mm-hmm. And I try to be real on my blog. I try not to be negative. I don't throw people under the bus, but I also say enough that people can figure out everything's not always. Rachel does great, but you know what? There's a lot of work that's done at home and behind the scenes to help her to be meaningfully included, to help her do the things she does. And, I'm just kind of real, that don't get mad at me. This is really the way I felt about this. Yeah. And I don't air things out on social media, though. I try to, if I've had a negative experience, I may say, well, today was like a train wreck, but you're probably going to have to reach out to me individually to get the nuts and bolts of what it was about. But anyhow, I have had really good feedback. My blog's been picked up several times by some like the Mighty, Yahoo. I had NBC pick up one of my blogs. And I'm very honored for that. It's funny that the ones that I think are the best are not always the ones other people think are the best. But anyhow.
So I read one where, and I love this, about how you have a special birthday tradition that you have done from her first birthday up until her 16th. Can you share what that is and also what the most common theme was? I loved reading that.
Do I remember what the common theme was? I'm not sure. I really am not. I don't know where I heard about it from. I probably read it somewhere, but we started when Rachel, I think when she was 1, we'd choose a book. It could be a classic. It could just be something. Hop on Pop was one, for example. My husband loved Hop on Pop. So that's the one she got one year. I don't remember, but we each wrote her a letter in each one of them about what, the joy, how much she had learned that year, the joy she had brought to our lives, how courageous she was. And when she hit about 16, we decided that was probably long enough. But so it's just been different books. I'm trying to think of some of my favorite books that we did. I can't even remember off the top of my head. Some years we couldn't find the book that we were kind of looking for, so it would end up being something different. But we still have all of those, and I pull them out every now and then and read through the letters. Sometimes I cry when I read through those letters. But it was a really, really fun tradition to do. It really was.
Yeah, it was on the one when she on her 24th birthday was when you were talking about it. And I love that. I love the writing of the letters. What aspect of parenting do you enjoy the most, and what has been the most rewarding aspect?
I don't know if that's a simple answer, but I will tell you just a couple of things. One, I don't know if this is the most rewarding aspect of parenting, but I've got a couple of things. One, Rachel usually has good manners. I said usually because you know how that goes when you say that. But she is polite and thoughtful. And I think those are such wonderful qualities. And I don't know that has anything to do, that might be how God created her. I hope that some of the things we've done have helped with that. One of our proudest days, Jonathan and I both say, was when she started reading. I remember that was one of the first things I thought when we found out she had Down syndrome. I didn't know anything about Down syndrome. Is she going to be able to read? We love to read. Is she going to be able to read? Well, Rachel is a beautiful reader, and she started reading. Comprehension's a struggle for her, but she started reading, about the same time all of her friends did. And because we are avid readers, that was, we love that. This is an interesting thing that's been rewarding to me. We spent all these years advocating for these different things. And of course, when she was younger, I was advocating for what would be and employment and dignity of work and being able to save and all those things. And she's been a part of that. And, you know, sometimes you're advocating for those things because you know they're good policies, but you haven't seen it in action with your own child. That has been really rewarding to me, to hear Rachel say things like, she will tell people, I get to save part of my money in my ABLE account. And guess what? I opened the first ABLE account in the state of Kansas. And just this week on social media, Rachel says very long prayers sometimes. And she always does the dinner prayer. And sometimes they are really long and she gets really focused on one person. It gets prayed for like 20 times. I'm not exaggerating by much. Night before last, I think it was night before last, her dinner prayer, she said, I wrote it down and read it to her. I always ask her permission before I post something about her. And I've done the same thing with her blog. My blog. That's one of the reasons I don't blog as much now, is because you don't have as much ammunition or material, and you do want to get their permission because it's their story, not your story. But she prayed and she said, thank you that I do not have to work Thursday or Friday and I still get paid. Thank you that I can save money in my ABLE account. Thank you that I have a job, you know, kind of like that. That has been something I shouldn't have been surprised at, but that we crack up at her because she doesn't work on Mondays, but she gets a lot of paid holidays on Monday. And she's like, I don't have to work Monday and I get paid. And we're like, well, you don't work. You wouldn't be working anyhow. That has been rewarding, is to be able to see how she has connected those dots. And she may communicate that in a different way than some of us would, but that she gets it, that she's being treated like everybody else and she is respected and she gets paid for holidays just like everybody else. She gets that. And that's been very rewarding to me.
What about her hopes and dreams? What are your hopes and dreams for her future, as well as what are some of the fears you have for her future?
Our hopes and dreams. She wants to get married. She's a romanticist. I'm not. She's been boy crazy since the day she was born. That she will tell you, I think she probably did when she did her podcast with you. That's her number one goal, is getting married. And one of our goals was for her to be able to have a job. One of our goals was for her, she wanted to have some sort of training after high school that she could do that. And she did go to college 3 semesters. Didn't work out exactly like we thought it would, but she did get to have that experience. And then COVID hit and she came home. So she had that experience. We wanted her to have a job that she loves, whatever that may look like. And she does seem to love her job. It may not be forever, I don't know, but she seems to love it. And it seems University of Kansas Hospital done a great job. Kudos to them. And she's done a great job. It's been a good thing. She wants to live out on her own, or says she does, in her pink house. I'm not sure about the pink house, but and y'all have to listen to her podcast to find out about that. But if she wants to live on her own, we want to do what we can to help her live on her own. And right now we're in that time of trying to prepare her for that, whatever that looks like. Housing, affordable housing, affordable, safe housing for people with disabilities is very, very, for anybody, is very challenging, but certainly for someone with Down syndrome. So that's, and we want her to get married. We want her to have friends and people to share life with, and she does. And if she wants to get married, we want her to get married, and that's her goal. So we hope that works out for her. Fears. I think your fears become a little more prevalent as you age. We have everything set up, have met at different points in our life with attorneys to set up special needs trusts that would be established at certain times, who would help with Rachel. We use a supported decision-making model and not a guardianship model. And we have that all planned out. But because of some of the government benefits, if she leaves Kansas, she would go to the bottom of a wait list in another state for services. So some of those things are kind of scary to me, because she is an only child and our families don't live here. So the people who we want and would help her don't live here. And I don't know what that looks like. So that's one of the things her dad and I are kind of focused on right now. And how we need that to look and what kind of steps we need to take over the next few years to mold that into something that's workable for everybody. So,
yeah. What has God taught you through having Rachel?
So much. But one of the things that I always say is Rachel finds joy in the journey. Mm-hmm. She is not happy all the time. That's a myth about people with Down syndrome. She has emotions just like everybody else. But she does usually see the good, and she does usually find the joy. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing I take from her, is that it has made me stop and think about there is joy in the journey, and all the things we go through make us who we are. The bad, the good, the mountains. If you never have a valley, how do you know that the mountains are great? But she finds joy in the journey, and I hope that I do more of that since I have her. So
I love it all. So is there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap things up?
Just thank you. I love, this has been fun. So you're so easy to talk to. So thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I love the sleeping beagle behind you.
I know. Look at her little eyes are starting to open up.
So my first baby was a beagle. So.
Was it? Oh,
Festus.
Oh, yes. She's gonna be 13, my little boy.
Well, he was 14 and he was a monster, but he was my baby. So
yeah. So I'm excited to let everybody know that I did actually interview Rachel already. But her episode is gonna air after Jawanda's. So that's why I didn't want to ask too many questions about Rachel, because I want her to be able to share it through her episode. So the other thing, last but not least, is your word. So what is a meaningful word for you? Or is there a goal for 2004 that you have a word that is going to help you, remind you to reach that in 2024? Even if it's a scripture, because I have numbers too. So if it's a favorite scripture, I can write this, type in the scripture and the chapter and verse as well. So what word?
Well, this was the hardest thing about this, but I came up with the 4 words, but I'm going to tell you the 4 words with the one I'm going to choose. I picked journey, passion, conviction, connect. Yeah. But connect is going to be my word. Right. And that's the last word I came up with. But the reason I'm going to say connect is I do love storytelling, but storytelling is about connecting people. And so much of what I do is about connecting people. And this year I realized I didn't realize it until I'd done it several times, but I'm frequently connecting somebody. You want to know how to do something about the Medicaid waiver in your state? I need to connect you to these people. They know more than I do. And I will put at the bottom when I'm introducing them, I love connecting good people. Mm-hmm. Well, that is a lot of what I do, is connect resources, connect people, in my job, but in life in general. And I love being connected to people. And so that's my word, is connect.
Well, I love it. And thank you, Kim and Justin, for connecting Jawanda and us.
Yes. Wonderful family.
Yes, they are. I love them. Well, thank you again so much. And everybody, stay tuned. Make sure you come back in and watch Rachel's episode after Jawanda's as well. So have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Thank you for joining us as we spread awareness through our personal stories and the many resources shared. You can help us by joining our village simply by sharing our show with the masses. You can also become a supporter of the show by clicking on the link in the show notes. Your funds will allow us to keep sharing these valuable, heartfelt stories and resources. Be sure to subscribe to our Guilbault Girls podcast and YouTube show, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Guilbault Girls.